Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Public Cloud Design Tips and Tricks. In this channel, we are going to discuss about a problem statement in every session and what is the solution for it. We will also discuss about in this solution what are all services which has been involved by different public cloud vendors and the basic fundamental about these services. So let's start. So we will cover two major public cloud vendors in this public cloud era. So Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. So today's problem statement, how to connect securely to cloud services from cloud private network. When I said customers public cloud private network, for Microsoft Azure, you will find it as virtual network, Vnet, and for Amazon Web Services, you will find it as VPC. And when we say the connectivity from the virtual network or from the VPC to the public cloud PaaS services, that means the connectivity will move outside from your private network. So how can that connectivity be established securely from your private network to PaaS services? So the solution, if you understand from Azure side, Azure has two solutions, Azure Virtual Network Service Endpoints and Azure Private Link Endpoints. We will discuss about both the solutions in detail and also we'll try to compare both the solutions, what are all ups and downs both the solution provides. With Amazon Web Services, you'll find the solution with Private Link and VPC endpoint. In this chapter, in this session, we will discuss more in detail about Azure Virtual Network Service Endpoints. Before that, let's try to understand what is a virtual network. So a virtual network is the fundamental building block for your private network in Azure. So it is nothing but very similar to a traditional VNet or network that you would operate in your own data center. That means it is completely restricted to your private organization. That's where we call it as a virtual network in Azure. So how to secure your virtual network? So to secure your virtual network, Microsoft Azure provides multiple solutions. Virtual network service endpoints, network security groups, application security groups, service tags, and many more. We will be discussing about virtual network service endpoint, what is all about this Vnet SEP, why we need virtual network service endpoint, list of Azure services that supports service endpoint, key benefits, and Vnet service endpoint policies, limitations, and pricing. So what is virtual network service endpoint and why do we need it? A virtual network service endpoint provides secure and direct connectivity to Azure services over an optimized route over the Azure backbone network. Please focus this point, over the Azure backbone network. We will compare this statement, this point when we will discuss about Azure private endpoint. So what it will do, it will establish a connectivity from your virtual network to your Azure PaaS services over an optimized route, right? So from your private network to PaaS services, as you know, PaaS services can be hosted outside your virtual network, right? So to have that connectivity securely in an optimized, the quickest route to that PaaS services is getting handled by the service endpoint. So that's where we need a service endpoint. So we can think about a scenario, let you have a virtual machine and you want to connect to a SQL database. So which is Azure SQL database, which is a PaaS service, and how can you do that? So with virtual network, you can have the connectivity to the SQL database and you can restrict only your virtual network can access the SQL database, no other can access it. So you can think about a scenario when you have multiple virtual network in your organization and you want to make sure only the virtual network one should access the SQL database. That's where this service endpoint will help you out. So by enabling the firewall, you can also whitelist the virtual network service endpoint, and with this your connectivity will be much more secure. Now let's try to understand why Azure service supports the service endpoint. So currently it is not like all the Azure services supports service endpoint. There are only list of services which are currently supporting service endpoint. So currently Azure Storage, Azure SQL Database, Azure Synapse Analytics, Azure PostgreSQL Database, Azure MySQL Database, Azure MariaDB, Cosmos DB, Key Vault, Service Bus, Event Hubs, Data Lake Storage Gen 1, App Services, Cognitive Services, and currently Azure Container Registry is in preview state. So only these services are supporting the Service Endpoint Virtual Network Service Endpoint feature. Now let's try to understand what are all key benefits. So by a Service Endpoint, what you can do, you can restrict or you can increase the security to connectivity between your virtual network to your PaaS services. That means only the supported Azure services, or which is currently supporting the Service Endpoint, the security to connectivity between your Vnet to that services has been increased because you can restrict it. Now the second benefit is optimal routing to Azure services. As I explained, so the connectivity from your Vnet to that particular service will follow the optimal route to reach the Azure services from your Vnet. And the most and beautiful benefit of this feature is it is really very easy to configure. You can easily configure it as compared to other services. Now, another thing is Virtual Network Service Endpoint Policy. So let's try to understand what is this Virtual Network Service Endpoint Policy. So that means with Service Endpoint Policy that allows you to filter the egress virtual network traffic to the respective Azure services. So let's try to think about a scenario. You have your subnet, you have your Vnet, inside which you have your virtual machines, and you want to connect to the Azure services like Azure Storage Account. Okay, inside this Azure Storage Account, you have two storage accounts, Storage Account 1 and Storage Account 2. You have enabled the Service Endpoint. That means from your Vnet, you can reach, from your virtual machine, you can reach both the services. But demands come, but you have the demand like you want to connect to Storage Account 1, not to Storage Account 2. For that case, you can use the Storage Account, the Virtual Network Service Endpoint Policy. With policy, you can restrict the connectivity to very specific, or you can filter out the connectivity to the very specific Azure services or the object of the Azure services. So that is the beauty of Azure Service Endpoint Policy. Now let's try to understand, these are all benefits that we have discussed. Now let's try to understand what are our limitations. So limitations, traffic routes to pass outside your private network. That means when you are reaching to the PaaS service which is outside your virtual network, so the traffic moves outside your virtual network to the PaaS services. That means your traffic is not inside your Vnet. Second, Service Endpoint can be enabled in Vnet deployed via ARM model. So if you have deployed your virtual network via the portal, like by creating the virtual network by clicking on the portal, then it will not support the Service Endpoint. You are bound to do the deployment via the Azure Resource Manager model. Third, Service Endpoint can be enabled from subnets within the Vnet, doesn't support traffic from your on-premises. So if you have enabled the Service Endpoint and you want to connect, you want a secure connectivity to your Azure services from your on-premise system, that is not supported via the Service Endpoint. So it is only between the Vnet to your Azure services. Then for Azure SQL and Azure ADLS Gen 1, virtual network needs to be in the same region. So if your virtual network in the same region and Azure SQL is in the same region, then only the Service Endpoint can be established. For Azure Storage, Service Endpoint also can be enabled from paired region to support RAGRS and GRS features. And the final one is Azure AD doesn't support Service Endpoints natively. So that is the base limitations with Virtual Network Service Endpoint. Now the final one is about the pricing. So how much cost do I have to pay? The simple answer is no additional charge for using Service Endpoint. The current pricing model of Azure services like your storage account, SQL database, etc. applies as is today, and no limitations on number of Service Endpoint inside a Vnet. So you can have multiple Service Endpoint inside a Vnet. That's it about the Service Endpoint fundamentals. I have followed these references to gather the information. If you need more detail, you can follow these links and you can get more details about this beautiful feature. If you like my session and you want to learn more about the future session, please do not hesitate to follow and like or comment my channel and this video. Thanks a lot, and talk to you in the next session. Thank you.